What a mammering, hasty-witted, joint-headed knight this was turning out to be! Rialt had spent 3 months on the northern border, ambushing Dath patrols, tangling their supply lines, and generally making any Dath soldier within firing range sorry to see him. Generally, making those varlets miserable was a pleasant way to spend a bit of his life away. Rialt's clan had been attacked by the Dath off and on for roughly 300 years, and the hatred between the Ramath and the Dath was as well nurtured as it was legendary. Anything that Rialt could do to make their lives frustrating and miserable was time well spent for him. If he hadn't been slogging through 4 feet of snow the entire time, he'd have enjoyed it far more. So here he sat, a man that had been deployed for 3 long, very cold months, a man that had tasted the home comforts of a warm bed he'd sorely missed. He deserved at least a full night's rest, did he no? He deserved a little time to thaw out, perhaps gorge himself on a well-baked meat pie, and dance a bit with the women. That isn't so much to ask, is it? How he got volunteered to be out on the road at this ridiculous hour, on a mission to save some giglet priestess, he could no ken. He had prayed to his own goddess, of course, asking if he should go, but hadn't gotten an answer. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Herself being a passionate sort, and a bit flighty at times, a day or more could pass before he got an answer. Thing is, he'd only been given 2 days to get to Beltane and break the giglet out, so he couldn't abide for an answer. Just in case, he reckoned it best that he went. If herself did tell him no, well, a little travelling never hurt a man. And if he saved the priestess before he got an answer, it would just be a good opportunity to give the woman an earful for leaving his people out of the barrier 6 months ago. He had no bother to unpack his gear, so it was an easy matter of switching out a few things that he would not need, and putting in a few things he thought he might. Then he went and saddled up his second favorite stallion, seeing as his favorite was worn out from 3 months of campaigning, and turned for the road. Sarvel reached the outskirts of Beltane roughly an hour and a half before dawn. He had been slowed a bit due to the poor condition of the road, forcing him to slow or risk breaking his stallion's legs. Probably just as well. He couldn't do much in the wee hours of the morning, anyway. There remained a lot of preparation that he needed to do this new day, not the least of which was to prepare for a quick escape. If he managed to get her out of that castle as smoothly as he hoped, they'd still need a quick escape ready to go. 2 fast horses and good travel food that wouldn't need cooking should do the trick. Sarvel, as a merchant's son, knew exactly how long it would take to do all the shopping necessary to prepare for a trip. For travel like this, where he had no fixed destination, it would take more than the usual preparations. He had to balance fast and light travel with preparing for possible situations they might encounter further down the road. The logistics of the problem set his temples a-throbbing. Not willing to try and talk his way past the city guard at this ridiculous hour of the morning. Guards were known to be cantankerous in pre-dawn hours on just general principle. He decided to stop right here and catch a few hours of sleep. From his mounted vantage point, he could see a small clearing off to the side of the road. He aimed for it, weaving his way in and out of the tall shrubs that pass for trees in this part of the country. The clearing was apparently often used by travelers, as it had the remains of a fire pit and the scuff marks left by bedrolls. Sarvel dismounted, loosened the girth of the saddle, and hobbled the stallion's legs. Dan blew out a weary breath, no doubt glad that his insane rider had finally stopped for the night. Sarvel gave him a pat on the neck, wishing he had some grain on him. Well, the grouse here looked edible enough, and Dan had never been shy about eating things. He made do with just his cloak, and curled up on the ground, not particularly worried about being attacked. Dan, as a former warhorse, didn't like most people, and wasn't shy about letting them know it. He'd keep watch while Sarvel stole a few hours of sleep. The ground was pitted with small rocks, wayward twigs, and random dips, so it wasn't exactly comfortable. Despite the minor discomforts, Sarvel quickly fell asleep. He'd worked a full day, and had only gotten 2 or 3 hours before being dragged out of bed. He was more than tired, his body willing to take any chance of reprieve offered. It seemed he'd barely closed his eyes before he heard Dan letting out a warning neigh. On sheer instinct, he snatched the sword lying beside him and rolled up to his feet, eyes snapping open to find the source of the threat. Not 10 feet away, another man sat calmly on horseback. His stallion pranced in place, wanting to answer the challenge Dan gave, but stayed back because of the silent command on his reins. It took Sorvel 2 blinks before his eyes could focus well enough to properly look at the man. He was tall. Tall enough to make Sorvel appear a bit short, which was difficult to do. His dark clothes were roughly made with leather and coarse linen, and did nothing to hide the obvious strength in his shoulder and legs. There wasn't enough light to see his face, only the impression of a beard and sharp eyes being possible by moonlight. Sorvel felt his heart lift a bit at the sight in front of him. This man looked unmistakably Ramothan to him. He stepped forward and put a calming hand on Dan's neck. "Easy, old Dan, easy." The stallion snorted and tossed his head, no doubt irritated that he couldn't attack the strangers like he wanted to. "You're out at an odd time of the morning," Sorvel stated neutrally. He was fairly sure this was the man he needed to meet, but it never hurt to be cautious. Well, I had a late-night visitor that would no leave a man be," he responded in a voice deep enough to vibrate mountains. "So afore she scoped me, I took to the road. Are you Sorvel Sarpan?" "I am," Sorvel answered with a sigh of relief. "Alejandra did not tell me your full name. In fact, she didn't give me any idea of where to meet up with you." "Royal Dexheimer," he responded. "Fortunately for us both, I had a notion or two of which route you'd take." With a tired grunt, he dropped out of his saddle. "Well, Sorvel Sarpan, are you biding here until the gates are properly open?" "That is my plan, yes. Gate guards at this hour are notoriously difficult to get past." There's truth. We've a lot of work to do if we're to rescue the priestess tonight, and I think we're short on time. How about you start a fire, so I can make us a cup, and we can make some plans?" Sorvel looked at the bag of tea that Royal pulled out of his saddlebag, and in the back of his mind a heavenly choir broke out into song. "That sounds like a wonderful idea."